On the 8th of February 2020, the 33rd general election for the Irish Parliament was held in Ireland. At that time, I was planning to make a video of this election. It's already April, and this is just put up now, so you may ask the valid question, why the delay? The answer is as depressing as it is shocking. It is already Easter, and yet the election is not over yet. To summarise the situation that played out gets a little complex, so please forgive me if this next part is not clear. Ireland is practically a two-party state with a half-dozen minor parties and several independent politicians. The two big fish are Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, both of which are highly unpopular, and both of which could only form a government from the past election by forming a coalition with each other. Recently, the very strong left-wing party Sinn Féin has been making waves and gaining in popularity. The result of this was that on the day after the election, these three parties ended up practically in a three-way tie on votes. Fine Gael does not want to continue sharing with Fianna Fáil, and vice versa. Also, neither of those two parties is willing to work with Sinn Féin. However, no party can get a majority for government without some kind of coalition, and the remaining smaller parties and independents will not be enough to get one party over the line, even if they could get them all on board. This has left the government in a stalemate. In the interim, the ones who were there before the election have decided to stay where they are. This situation leaves Leo Varadkar as the Prime Minister or Taoiseach for now. I have previously made a video about Leo calling him the partial Prime Minister, as he came out as gay a few years before being installed in office. After that, he spent quite a lot of time as a participant in gay pride marches across the world. With straight leaders, this could be viewed as solidarity with the homosexual community. With Leo, it comes across as a self-serving demonstration of which part of the population he prefers to represent. Now, with this new twist, he is not only the partial Prime Minister, he is also the partial Prime Minister, until this election is resolved. There was a push after the election to try and select the Prime Minister and Parliament. The shocking result was the Sinn Féin leader got the majority of the votes. Thankfully, there is also a certain threshold of votes that are required for the vote to be recognised, and she fell short of the minimum, so the threat has temporarily been averted. Here is one interesting aside that might cause massive problems for the EU during this Brexit process. Let's say that Sinn Féin are eventually elected as the leading party. This could lead to a significant diplomatic incident if IRA activity continues in the north. For those of you who do not know the politics, Sinn Féin is the political arm for the IRA in Northern Ireland. Lots of people are going to claim this has not been true since the Good Friday Agreement of 1998, but in my opinion, that's mostly spin. There has been an uptick in IRA activity in Northern Ireland in the past few years, including car bombings and shootings. Now just imagine what the outcome would be if Sinn Féin were the leading party in the Republic and somebody else in the north gets killed by the Irish Republican Army activity. This could potentially be perceived as an act of war from the Irish Republic. The choice then being the EU goes to war with the UK, or, more likely, the Irish government and the EU will be forced to remove IRA operatives to de-escalate the situation. Maybe I am just being too optimistic. I was going to finish it there, but so many people have been complaining about my lack of content, especially long-form content, that I'm going to expand on the failures leading to the current disaster that is the 2020 Irish election. These fall under several headings. 1. The financial crash of 2009. I am not going to give a blow-by-blow account of the crash. It affected pretty much every country on earth, but some countries got the brunt of it more than others. Ireland's case was unique, and some would say brutal. Unlike Greece in 2009, Ireland actually had a relatively healthy, stable economy, and initially held its own. The problem at the start was limited to the banks, and they were about to completely tank. Then, Mama Merkel had a word with the Irish government and made it very clear that Germany had a lot of investments in Irish banks, and she explicitly stated that not one of them was allowed to fail. With their backs up against the wall, the only avenue possible for the government at the time, a Fine Gael majority, was to use the country's reserves to plug the hole of the debt of the banks. As soon as other EU countries heard this, their banks immediately dumped a vast amount of the EU bad debt into the Irish banks, which significantly worsened the pending bill to the government. Long story short, it was the sharpest point of the crash for Ireland, driving the economy straight into the ground. Then deeper. The banks walked away laughing, while the country as a whole suffered, and the blame was left at the feet of the government in power. After that time, the EU punished the Irish people for quote-unquote losing the run of themselves by borrowing too much, thereby quote-unquote causing the crash. The EU eventually gave a loan to Ireland to help it, but it came with horrendous strings attached, essentially ceding control of the country to Germany. I have a report recorded from that time which describes the situation.
It's the musical that has broken all records. A box office smash in Greece, Argentina, and Latvia. Directed by Ollie Wren, written by Bertie Ahern and Charlie McCreevy, IMF, the musical.
It's like Ireland has been waiting for 80 years for this musical, and now Portugal and Spain are just wishing they had it too.
Featuring the mind-boggling choreography of Sean Fitzpatrick and an orchestral arrangement by Michael Fingers Fingleton. This December 7th in the O2 Arena, IMF the Musical will bring a tear to your eye. Featuring the all-star Irish cast in their final roles.
Okay, Mr. Lenihan,
Yes.
This is the scene where we just discover the final figure of the bailout. Okay?
Right, yes.
Places, everyone. Off you go.
The sun will come out
Mr. Lenihan.
tomorrow.
No.
sorry.
Mr. Lennon, your piano playing is excellent, but
Thank
you're
you, yes.
forgetting the lyrics. It's the sum.
Oh.
S-U-M. M for Merkel.
I've got it now, yes.
Off you go again.
The sun will come out
Yes.
tomorrow. Argentina, Greece, and Latvia.
Easy on the reverb, guys.
IMF.
Little flat bride, but keep the momentum.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
Tomorrow.
Oh.
We'll owe you.
Yes.
Tomorrow.
Well done.
We're only a dig out.
Tears.
Away.
Wonderful, Mr. Lennon, wonderful.
Thank you, yes.
Now off you go with Fitzy to rehearse the dance moves.
Oh, The exclusive Irish production is the envy of all of Europe, featuring the star of Broadway, the West End, and the North Side, Bertie Ahern.
I want a roll in this because I writ this, okay? Can we get off you go. Can we get a bit of an instrumental going, thanks? No, this scene is a cappella. The country can't afford music at this point. Have you not read the script, Mr. Ahern?
Look, I writ the bleeding thing, alright?
Who is your vocal coach? Yes?
Nicky from Boys Life is my vocal coach.
I can tell. Okay, just get on with it, Mr. Ahern.
Okay, here we go.
Rehearsal.
Shout.
What is...
Bail us all out.
Phrasing.
These are the funds we can't do without.
Come
on.
Your pronunciation is terrible. Get his understudy.
Understudy.
Royston Brady, stage, please.
Jesus, not him.
Bertie, I thought you sang very well there.
Shut your mouth, Nicky.
The musically true story of the IMF's journey to Ireland, in good times and in bad.
Okay, the next scene is where the economists warn us about the future. Think doom and gloom. George Lee, David McWilliams, Eddie Hobbs, places, please.
David, you're on piano.
Thank you, George.
All right, hit it. Recession bites. Yes. One thing's sure, in the banks, no cash more. I told you that things would get so poor. You gotta be a prophet of doom.
Well done, David, on piano.
Gotta be a prophet of doom, boys. Okay. Gotta be a prophet of doom.
Excellent.
Told you things would get so poor. You gotta be a prophet of doom. You tell him how it's done, David, oh yeah.
The New York Times says it's the surprise blockbuster of the year. The most expensive musical in history, when the economy is disappearing down the plug hole like slops from a pub counter. You can rely on IMF, the musical. The sum will come out tomorrow.
2. A disenfranchised voter base. A full year before the financial crisis in June 2008, the Irish populace was asked to vote on the controversial Lisbon Treaty. The population rejected the treaty by a margin of 53.4% to 46.6%. This drove the overlords of the EU into a fury, and after a year of one-sided fear-mongering propaganda and repeatedly telling the Irish population that they had voted wrong, a second vote was forced through. This time, the EU dictators were pleased as they got the result they wanted. This was at least the second time a second vote on an EU referendum was forced on the Irish population. The problem was that this left many people in Ireland feeling that their vote was not respected and made them question whether the ballot box was the best way forward. I am sure you all know the John F. Kennedy quote, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable." I have not gone through the figures myself, but I would bet that turnout has been noticeably lower for all votes since then. To elucidate my point, I have an additional report for you here.
Standing by, Domo.
How come Peter Collins is doing Euro 2008?
Bill is off with a cold, I'm afraid.
Bad luck, Bill.
Yeah.
It's kind of like having Ken Hammond doing 6-1, isn't it?
On air.
Hello, I'm Dobbo with the top stories. Here are the votes of the Lisbon jury. It's referendum day as all European eyes turn to Ireland. With me in studio are the leaders of the yes and no camps, Taoiseach Brian Cowan and Sinn Féin's Gerry Adams. First to you, Taoiseach, do you think it'll be a oui monsieur to Lisbon?
Can't talk about it. Can't say nothing. I'm keeping my mouth shut.
What?
May freshen. Not a word, no way.
Why?
Moratorium. Can't talk about it on voting day, Brian.
Damn, I'd forgotten about that. Right, well, what can we talk about?
What about the football?
Calculor, the Euro Championships,
Right, well, Euro 2008 it is. It's been cracking so far. Germany and Spain, the favourites. What do you think, Gerry Adams?
Well, I think it's typical of Europe to set up a system which clearly favours the big states.
Here we go.
And in which Ireland has no say whatsoever.
Well, that's rubbish.
Taoiseach.
Because the smaller states have a bigger chance of winning, as Greece have shown before.
Well, it's time for us, Gerry Adams, to reject the UEFA system and to send this government back to negotiate a better deal for Ireland in the next championship.
Ireland has done well out of Europe. And we've forgotten Stuttgart 88, Brian.
It's time for Plan B.
There is no Plan B, you
Plan B.
There's none.
Okay, gentlemen, this debate is going nowhere.
No Plan B.
Let's go to Cork now, from where plastic sheeting reports on voting in the rebel county. Go home, the pair of you.
Shut your mouth.
You shut up.
It's been a case of debate hate for the legions in the regions, like as the people of Cork rise up against the yeas and the nays in the Lisbon vote. The pain of the campaign has set in as thousands of rebel revellers prepare a large bonfire on St. Patrick Street to burn thousands of tons of referendum leaflets. But nobody can afford a litre of diesel to put an end to the Lisbon debate.
What are you talking about, boy?
Lisbon debate. I'm live on the telly here.
Here, lads, we've got another one talking about, you know what?
What are you doing?
Are you on about it again, you langer?
Oh, Jesus, rank!
Let's get up!
Plastic sheeting!
We're sick of that bloody thing!
Don't mention the L word!
Second langer! Right, well, referendum fatigue setting in the south there. It's pretty much the same story in the west of the country, where we join our correspondent Jim Fahey. I'm standing here in a purpose-built clinic specifically designed to house victims of Lisbon fatigue. Dozens of people from Galway and Mayo are being treated here for acute phobia of anything to do with Lisbon.
Stop saying it!
Even the slightest mention of Lisbon is enough to set them off. As a solution, one county councillor has proposed removing from all maps and atlases all future mention of the city of Lisbon. Jim Fahey, Lisbon, Galway. I think Jim rather enjoyed that. Right, well, we go now where there's no risk of mentioning that debate, because Gerald Fleming has all the European weather forecast for those of you planning holidays. Gerald.
Hello there, and a very good evening to you.
Great.
Well, all the best football and weather is being enjoyed at the moment by the Portuguese, as you can see from the high pressure over Lisbon right now.
Well, we just better not mention that for now, Gerald, thanks.
Right, so, well, moving along to the south of France,
Great.
a few thunderstorms affecting Nice today.
We better stay clear of Nice as well, Gerald. Some bad memories there.
Well, not to worry, because moving northwards across Europe now, there is a heat wave on the way there for the beautiful Dutch city of Maastricht this evening.
Oh, God, just forget the weather, Gerald.
Okay, so
Getting a headache.
Bye-bye for me.
Oh, get Ken Hammond to fill in for me. I'm going on holidays.
Okay, Double.
And it won't be to bloody Lisbon either. Get me a dispatch.
3. Poor choice in political candidates. I will admit that Ireland does not have a track record in strong political candidates. For a long time, it did not matter. To quote the comedian Sean V. Ginnity, things in the world can be serious, but they're not hopeless. Whereas here in Ireland, things are hopeless but not serious. The situation changed after Ireland became an EU member. Things got a lot more serious, but the government didn't change, it just became more corrupt. You only have to take the case of the former Prime Minister Bertie Ahern, or as he was known, the Teflon Taoiseach, as nothing stuck to him even after decades of tribunals. Here is an ironic part for you all. I'm going to make a defence case for one. The former Fianna Fáil Prime Minister, Brian Cowan. Brian was elected to the position of Prime Minister after Bertie, and he was in my opinion a stronger and more ethical leader than his predecessor. During the start of the financial crisis, he did take charge, made numerous public statements, and made impossible decisions at a time when it looked like the Irish Republic was going to be crushed. The only major fault that I would attribute to him was that when the government bailed out the banks, he had not fully identified the costs, and that there was no quid pro quo. The banks got a blank cheque, and aside from the government taking stakes in the banks were not obligated to do anything to help clean up the mess they helped create. In fact, they got busy trying to claw back any bit of money they could lay their hands on, which had the knock-on consequence of stopping the Irish economy. However, I'm drifting off topic here. Suffice to say, in the absence of the financial crisis, I think that Cowan would be perceived of as a great leader, and Fianna Fáil could still be in charge. Outside of that, there really is no one on the political chessboard in any party today that I would consider competent enough to run a brewery, let alone the country. After Cowan was ousted in 2011, he was succeeded by Damon Kenny, a school teacher who became leader of Fine Gael. Yeah, he He was great at giving the Catholic Church a political kick in the groin. It takes a big man to punch an institute he formerly supported when they're down. However, he was purely a lackey of the EU, never once failing to carry out any order Germany gave him. He was only following orders, you see. Ende was in turn succeeded by the partial Prime Minister after a series of no confidence votes. This leads us to the situation we are in today. Now let's be completely fair about this. Ireland is not the only country in the EU in this boat. Many other members are suffering from a lack of leadership. Some have put forward the position that because the EU members have given away all their decision making to the Supreme EU Council, that leadership at the country level has been lost. We could also be placing previous leaders who we saw as strong on higher pedestals than they deserve. Who can say? I'm not a historian, I am just ludicrous. So where does this leave us? Like I said at the start, stuck in the middle of a pandemic and a three-way tie with parties that nobody really wants in.